Thank you for joining us. This is live with the Miami's Community News, and our guest today is Gladys Amador, who is a licensed mental health counselor with Kerlaty Hospitals and with the Be Well group, which is the part of emotional support for people. Oh, and we have a guest that has arrived. Terrific. All right. So we're going to talk about people's emotional state during the last several years. Some of the figures are startling about people, the number of people that are under stress. And when we look about the stress of every day dealing with, and for the kids, are we in school today? We're not in school. Yeah. Mom there, dad there, mask, no mask. And there have been 600,000 people plus that have died throughout the country prematurely, if you will. And that's left a lot of people without the support system that they've had. And you do daily work with people in therapy, yes, right? And again, you're a licensed mental health counselor. So what does that mean as far as your studies and your degrees?
So thank you for having me. And it means that I am what people would understand as a psychologist or somebody you go and talk to. So back in the day, maybe like the couch, right? You're sitting down and having that conversation. But we have a lot of professionals in it's LMHC or LCSWs, which are social workers. And we really do a lot of that heavy lifting. We work with psychiatrists. We do consultations with psychiatrists who are the doctors, right? So they will provide medications, but we do talk therapy. So what we're known for is that person that you would go to seek professional counseling.
And as far as the company, tell us about the history of the company when it came to Miami.
When it came to Miami. So I don't know if I'm the historian for Sanitas and Kerlaty, but I know that they have a lot of clinics. So we have clinics all the way from Kendall, Doral, Hialeah. We have Fort Lauderdale, Boca, into Orlando, and we're in other states as well. They're a very big company. They actually just bought the hospital, which was formerly known as Westchester Hospital. And it's a 126 bed hospital. 26 of those beds are for psych units, inpatient. So people who may need help in that.
So area. The old Westchester Hospital was sold to the group,
yes,
which is on Corway 24th Street, right off the Palmetto. Congratulations to people for coming to Miami. And so about 20% of the beds are set aside for
26,
reasons,
yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty big percentage.
It is.
So let's talk about the emotional trauma that has occurred to just about everybody because of this pandemic. So what is that like for you as a therapist and listening to people? What sort of stories do you hear and talk about the trauma that has occurred?
So I think that it's hard to find someone who has not been affected by the current situation, the economic situation, and like you mentioned, the instability. We don't know if we're going to be in school or not in school, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. A lot of grief, something that is touching so many people because of the deaths that COVID has taken, like you said, prematurely. And so grief is a huge issue that I think that psychologists and therapists are dealing with. I myself am dealing with grief. I lost my father last year, and I have to say that seeking support from someone, especially when you're dealing with new emotions, a lot of things that are fear-based or grief and loss of any kind, it really affects you. It affects your productivity. It affects your livelihood because there's a heavy weight on you, and sometimes you just don't know what to do.
So when that grief happens, it doesn't just affect you, it affects everybody in that unit and friends of that and that whole support system.
Yes.
My wife, for a year and a quarter, only went out of the house 7 times. Everybody deals with it differently.
Yes.
So one day she thought I had a pedicure done here. I went home. I thought she'd be happy. No, she was very upset. She locked me out of the house. So we came here trying to lighten it up, which was okay. So we took a video of the shower and the kitchen, and then here's my bed. It was a cot. It took her 3 or 4 days to get over that. And what it came down to was I paying enough attention to her feelings about that?
Yes.
Now, folks, we do have glass that's in between us here, right? And everybody does handle it differently.
Yes.
In our office here, we, for a year and a half, anybody that came in the building, wash your hands,
right,
wear a mask.
Right.
We clean this every time, every day, all the time. People started working home. We had shower curtains, if you will, dividing people. Most people have their own room.
Yeah.
And we only had 1 case recently in a year and a half. So we were delighted to be able to do that. And everybody does handle it differently.
Yes.
So what are some of the symptoms that you see from people from the get-go, from the time you would see them?
Well, obviously that isolation, we've been told to stay away from each other, the social distancing. And what happens is that we create more distance between each other, right? So it's people really feeling lonely. I would say that the other epidemic is loneliness. People feel very alone, or like they're the only ones that are feeling a certain way. There's a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, a lot of fear, and they get mixed up and you kind of go back and forth. Those are also stages of grief, right? When we're angry,
Yes.
we're experiencing sadness, denial shock, which is the first one, and then bargaining, right? So we start to bargain and negotiate with what just happened. And in many ways with COVID, it's been similar because we're kind of bargaining and negotiating with this disease that's constantly evolving and changing. We're being told different things. And how do we manage that?
A friend of mine, age at that point, he was 73, 75. Right after I got my first shot, I called him and he says, Michael, I want you to think about all the seniors that have not gotten their shots. He was active COVID in his house. He says, Michael, this is the disease of loneliness. He says, if I go in the hospital, I'm going to be alone. If I'm at home, I'm afraid I'm giving my provider, his wife, the disease.
Yes.
So there is that isolation.
Yes.
And of course, even with just the masks.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And even with this right here,
Yeah.
there's this disconnect, right?
A complete
that happens.
disconnect.
And then we yearn for that. And that's a type of grief in itself,
Yes.
a loss of
Yes.
hugging your children or your wife or your friends. Now it's like the different things that you might want to do.
Yes.
And so here we are a year and a half in,
Yeah.
where 6 weeks ago it started peaking back up, right? And we're unsure what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do this,
we are
do
sure.
that. So for anybody, especially people that are a little bit fragile, that have lost somebody,
Yeah.
that's pretty unnerving.
Yes, it is. And I know I experienced that. So we do have guilt because we don't know if we're bringing it home to our families. For those of us who work in the medical field and we're in the clinics or we're in the hospitals, we do everything that we can and do all the protocols, but you never know what you're going to bring home. I myself didn't hug my dad for almost 2 months right before he passed. And I remember feeling so much guilt and shame about it because I was like, well, I should have just done that. I should have given him that extra hug, that extra kiss. And so many people struggle with that. Or even just that last moment that you had with them before they went into the hospital and then they were alone and they die alone, or you have these nurses that are overburdened because they're doing that hard work of being with someone when they take their last breath.
There seems to be this inconsistency in the belief system of vaccinations for healthcare workers. Some of them have made a decision. I'm going to work in COVID. All right. I'm going to be around COVID patients that are every day. All right. And you see pictures of it. It's like, it takes my breath away.
Yeah.
And considering you walk into a restaurant, is it safe to wear a mask? Is it not? So with so many healthcare providers not having the vaccination, and they're, for whatever the reasons are, and that's fine, but to be in that environment where, oh my goodness, I might get this and take that home to my kids. The Miami Herald did a 4-part series at Jackson South, starting in March 2020. It was a tremendous job that they did. It was 2 or 3 main actors and a physician, a nurse practitioner, and some other things, and talking about the grief that they were going through.
Yes.
And the separation from the families. They showed this one guy, happened to be a nurse, about, did he give it to his wife? Did he give it to the children? Living in different places.
Yeah.
So all that is very disruptive.
It is.
We know that productivity for people that have not had it is extremely disruptive. And so often we build our character and who we are on the work that we do.
Yeah.
So how is it you talk to people, and what is it you listen to and discuss with them about the loss of productivity and clarity?
So, everything that in our life kind of is this holistic approach. I like to look at it as holistic because it's not just my job or my home. It's not just my friends and my family. It's not just school. It's really the whole of the person. And when something happens to someone, as grief, whether it was the loss of a person, the loss of a job, the financial instability, if you lost your home, or just having to be separated from your support system, and mainly that's your household, right? I think that it has a huge effect on everything else, right? Everything that you touch. For myself, I know every job I've ever had, right? You take skills from that job and you use it in the next one. And I've had different careers and different things that I've done. And I think I've been able to learn from all of them. And so when we look at mental health from that holistic approach, your emotion and your mental state has a lot to do with your physical body. So how healthy you're going to be, and also how productive or efficient you're going to be at your job, whether you're the doctor or that nurse or the medical assistant at that facility.
And so we look now how the work environment has changed so much. We have several people that have for a year and a half have not worked in the building.
Yeah.
And so what we recognize is for them and for us, the office work family that we had has been forever altered.
Yes.
And so many people love coming in work, going around the water fountain and complaining about whatever it happens to be and about the fun things they're doing. But that affects our well-being.
It does.
At home, all right?
It does.
And so what is it that somebody could do who's watching this right now and they're feeling like everybody else, because we all live in a yellow submarine, I get that, right? But they're feeling pretty isolated.
Yeah.
Because they're working at home, the spouse is in the other room, they're afraid they're going to get COVID, or maybe they already have it, they're afraid they're going to get it again.
Yeah.
So what are some suggestions for them to, if they're not ready to go talk with somebody, what is it they could do for themselves?
So I think that talking to someone, right? Sometimes we think like there's a stigma, right, with mental health, and that's a big part of my job is helping to get that stigma out, especially from certain cultures and communities where it's like, well, I don't need to see a psychiatrist, I don't need to see a psychologist. But the fact that we all need whomever, that we don't isolate, that we don't stay to ourselves, that we don't keep those thoughts in our heads because they get louder and louder and louder. Getting it out is super important. And for some people, it is talking. For some people, it's doing artwork or music, right? Any way that you're able to express yourself, because if not, it just kind of circles in your mind and you have that thought over and over and it gets really loud in there. And if you don't get it out, it can be very disturbing.
So we know there's Olympic swimmer who won public, right? We recently had 2 Olympians, gymnasts,
yes,
right?
Yes.
That essentially said, I'm just a person.
Yes.
And I think one of the tennis players that had, it's like, what's happening? I'm 40 years old and I've lost this. And so there is a lot of grief with that.
Yes.
And we know that there's people that have suicidal thoughts, right?
Yes. Yes.
So what is it that they should do? Right. And at that point, I'd like you to look right in that camera and tell them if they're watching you right now and they're thinking about hurting themselves.
So I'd like for you to know that you're not alone, that many people have suicidal ideation, which are just thoughts of wanting to not be around, or that'd be better if I wasn't here, or if I hurt myself in some way, because then I could just be done with this thing. And I would say that you're not alone, that it's important to tell someone, that you don't keep that thought in your head because it will get louder. That there are places that you can go to. The National Suicide Hotline is a place that you can call and speak to a professional at a crisis center. You can always walk into your nearest hospital in the emergency room and tell people what you're thinking and what's going on, and someone will help you and they'll keep you there for observation and make sure that you get what you need. But don't keep the thought to yourself, and that there's no need to feel any shame or embarrassment because of that thought, because you wouldn't be the first one and you won't be the last one.
And thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
And that we know that there's a lot of survivor's guilt that's going on. How come
Yes.
they got it and I didn't get it?
Yes.
I was in a group the other day, 6 people, everybody vaccinated, 4 had it recently.
Yeah.
I have not.
Yeah.
I was in another group, 8 people, there were 2 kids. So it was 6 that had shots, and out of the 6, 4 received it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're thinking, okay, so you didn't get it. You didn't suffer like your spouse. You didn't suffer like your friend. You didn't wind up in the hospital.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing more of that. How come I was spared?
Yeah.
So what's that internal conversation like?
Survivor's guilt is interesting. I think that we have different coping mechanisms. Everybody does. One of them is guilt. The other one is shame and blame, and they're kind of all family. And so we kind of go around in those realms. And survivor's guilt is really exactly what you said. How come I was deserving or undeserving, kind of this worthiness, right? Like, how come I'm here and my friend is not, or my spouse is not, or my child? And I think that's something that I talk about a lot, obviously, in grief counseling, is that we're all kind of going to go that way. We know that this place is a temporary place, and one day, we all have expiration dates is kind of a lighthearted joke, but we have this expiration date. We're here one day, and one day we're not.
Mm-hmm.
And in the time that we are here, what can we do with our time? Like, how can we serve others? How can we provide support in some way? And I think that can be the shift, right? Like, how am I using my time and my gifts and my talents? And I think that makes
So
a
we've
difference.
seen over the last year and a half, not so much anymore, but at the beginning, people would go to where there was a food drive and to be able to give out food
Mhm.
and to the people that were needy, and the people on that
Yes.
side and this side, that was the same group. right? Except for one was driving and one was putting the food in there.
Yeah.
And we see that, and we know that that helps.
Yes, it
One of,
does.
one of the great things that happened here, we had this conversation, and there was somebody that heard it and made a $5,000 donation to local
Wow.
food, right? And thank you for doing that, because I know you're watching today.
Yeah.
When you can be part of that change,
Yes.
we feel good inside when we do that. Right?
100%.
And it takes it from in here and it puts it out there.
Yes.
Because we know that lots of people, I would say most,
Yeah.
right? You know, I don't know anybody that is not affected one way or the other.
Yes. Yes.
One of the things that we were able to do here when we said last to whatever March that was, what are we going to do to stay connected?
Yes.
So we increased what we do here as far as communicating with people, and started doing more interviews and started talking more about COVID. And we were fortunate to have Martha Perez from the school board bring in some mental health counselors and talk about how they were hiring more people. I think 40 more mental health counselors,
Yes.
came in.
Yes.
Let's talk about parents and their kids, their young children, and how they're coping and what the parents should be looking for.
So, being a parent is a difficult job, so I don't know how they do it. Honestly, I have so many parents that come through because I see adults, and they talk about their children. And one of the things is, how much time are they spending in their room by themselves? Are they feeling free or open to communicate with you and tell you like what's going on? The fear and the uncertainty, especially in schools now, what's happening with the school board, and if the mask, no mask, and how do you feel like that you can protect your child, because you send them off to school, you don't see them for many hours in the day, and you kind of just pray that you can pick them up in the afternoon and that they're still whole and healthy and complete. And I think that's taken a toll on many people, on caregivers and grandparents and parents.
So if what we're going through at this moment was happening last March, we would have never been out of our houses. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at, say, okay, before we were shocked, now we're sort of trying to figure out how to maneuver through this so we can continue, with our lives. And so one of the things that we've recognized, when the parents are having issues themselves,
Yes.
and they have to deal with everything else, there's their spouse, work or no work, right?
Yes.
Transportation, maybe they used to do group transportation, they don't want to do that anymore.
Yes.
Go into a restaurant, don't go into a restaurant.
Yes.
And we see, and we've done a lot of events over the years, that there is a group think that goes on in any area. If most of the people wearing masks, guess what? The other people are going to wear masks.
Right.
And if they're not, it's rare.
Mm-hmm.
We did an event the other day, and we said, please comply with CDC regulations. Out of 200 people, I don't think there were 5 that were wearing masks.
Mm.
And you go, okay, what caused that? Well, there could be leadership that does that, and other people say, I feel comfortable enough, all right?
Yeah.
And maybe it was the age group or whatever. But even after that, as I was in that group, to go, did I get it?
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Am I going to take it home?
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Yeah.
Am I not going to take it home?
Yeah.
I know somebody was out of the country for a couple of weeks. I said, I'll see you in 2 weeks. All right? Came back to Miami. I said, I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Never thought about doing that before. And so here we have the little kids that could get it. Little kids can give it to their parents.
Yes.
So don't hug Johnny. No, hug him.
Right.
Dr. Ethan Shapiro, he's a neuropsychologist, has written a lot of books. So about a year ago, he wrote a book and he made it free available to people online.
Yeah.
And I started reading it, and it was for kids. Wow, this is as much for the parents as but because as you're reading it, you're going, no, this is for me. Johnny's going to get it next, but I'm going to read that. And they talk about their feelings.
Yes.
So when people go into therapy and they're talking with you, what sort of symptoms do they have as they're expressing themselves about where they're at with COVID?
So there's assessments that we do to gauge how much anxiety and or depression somebody might have. And typical symptoms are changes in your sleep, whether you're sleeping too much or too little, outside of that 7 to 9 hour window, feeling tired, low energy, your change in appetite. So some people stop eating or they overeat because, emotional eating is a thing, right? It's a comfort. Another one is if you're irritable, people who get very angry easily, and maybe they weren't like that before, but they're all of a sudden their tolerance has come down. Trouble relaxing, very restless, that they can't sit still. So those are some of the more basic symptoms.
So during times like this, Is there an uptick in alcohol and drug abuse?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the purpose of them doing that is to do what?
To cope. It's the same way that other people might use food. Somebody else will use alcohol.
We don't know anything
or
about
cigarettes.
that food around here.
Yeah, me neither. We all use something though, because if it's not cigarettes or drugs or alcohol, then it's going to be food or overworking or running. It could be anything, and of course, some of those have positive consequences, and some of them might have more negative ones.
Are there people that haven't really abused drinking or drugs that have said, "Okay, I'm going to go do that," or these people that statistically are the people that have always been on the edge and they're just doing more of it?
I think it's a really dangerous time for people in recovery, or people who are using right now actively. We work with a group that they actually go to the homes and they're going to do at-home recovery. And I think it's wonderful that we have those resources, because that's a big part of our job as well, is to make sure that the client, when they come in, or the patient that they come in, that they have everything that they need. So if they need the psychiatry care, that they get that. If they need the addiction specialist for substance abuse.
So when people go to you and your organization, you can talk to them and you can help direct them to get other stuff.
Absolutely. That's a huge part.
Food, what is it called when the kids don't have enough food?
Like a food bank, or?
Well, no, they're afraid where their next meal is going to come from.
Food insecurity.
Yes.
Yeah.
So is that a real thing, and what does that look like?
I think that it is a real thing. I mean, there's all kinds of research and studies of people like infants that don't have enough to eat, or children who are not getting enough to eat because they were in school originally getting their lunch, for example, free or reduced lunch, and now they're not in school. If they've been at home, where are they getting their food from? If mom and dad are not working, or there's just not enough groceries.
In the beginning, the school board was in some areas delivering food.
Correct.
Because with that in mind.
Correct.
So I just can't
It's a
imagine
huge
what it'd be
thing.
like not to have enough food to give to your kids.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so unsettling thinking about that.
It is.
Right?
It is.
And so I guess there's a lot of guilt in there when the parents lose their job or whatever it is, and like, where do we go, at this? One of the great things that we saw that CHI did, it was take the vaccine and get it to the people in the mobile vans. He took it in the areas to the people that were not connected.
Yes.
So
Yes.
people that are not connected, that don't have money, all right, that don't know what to do, what can your hospital do for them?
So I don't actually, I'm not in the hospital because it's more inpatient. I
Yes.
do outpatient at the clinics that Sunny does. And I know that something that we do is we have a chronic care program. So of course the doctors and nurses are usually the front line for that patient to assess what their needs are. And we make sure that they get referrals and they are sent to the correct doctors, the correct places. And one of them is that they have social workers who might come to their home and assess their needs. And, if they need food, if they need food stamps or any kind of government assistance, that they make sure that they receive that. So, that our job is a very important job because it connects them to what they need.
So at the Be Well program, people can find that online. They can start by communicating with you and your facility, all right?
With
And
Sanita.
you have some local clinics, all right?
Yes,
So
many.
Many, yes. And people, it's a good place for them to get to.
Yes.
If somebody says, I don't want to do that, I want something that's faster. What can they do faster? Say, I want to make one phone call. Who should they call?
Well, if you're having suicidal thoughts, definitely the suicide hotline is a place that you would call. You can, like I said, to your nearest emergency room and ask for help there. If it's not that serious where you're having suicidal thoughts, but you do want to talk to someone, you can go through your insurance company and find somebody who will take you. There's community healthcare centers, which are amazing. I worked for one for many years, and it provides people who maybe don't have insurance the possibility to get that care.
I recently, in the last couple of years, knew two people that committed suicide.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, what could I have seen? Nothing. All right. It wasn't there. But then subsequent to that, there's somebody came to me and she said she wanted to kill herself. So I asked somebody else to come in. I said, would you repeat to her what you did?
Yeah.
I said, okay, give me your family's phone number. Got the family on the phone.
Yeah.
Said, this is what it said. Repeat what you just said to the two of us.
Yeah.
And so I got them into a group, meaning their family, that could help them, right?
Nice.
Because that was something that I knew, right? And just by virtue, they came to me to confess that, right? There was an obligation on my part to do something
Yes.
When you see something like that, you have to do something.
Yeah.
Right?
We don't want to just ignore someone. If somebody is reaching out and telling you, I'm having these really dark thoughts, or, I really need help, like that olive branch, that's a huge thing. And so, like we said earlier, one of the ways that we feel better is to serve someone else. And that's why I think humans seek other humans out. That's why this isolation has been so painful, because that's not how we function. We exist in relationship to each other. And so when we don't have the other, we start to have that spiraling in our emotion and in our mental
Yeah,
health.
but put aside COVID for a second.
Mhm.
I was in my general practitioner and she said, go get a hearing test. I go, the doctor says, well, you have selective hearing. A year later, well, that's it. I said, okay. And I was told, Michael, one of the things you have to be careful of is that you don't get isolated because you can't hear it.
Yes.
And then after a while, it's too hard to hear it, so you just don't hear it. Then you realize, oh, you're moving away instead of. And so we made some adjustments, which is I think about what they said
Yes.
and try to connect the word that I'm not hearing.
Yeah.
But there was a true sense of isolation just
Yes.
from not being able to participate.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so we know if there's ambient conversation behind me, I can't hear you,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we're like this, it's perfect,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So thank you for, I can hear you perfectly.
Yeah, I think that the inclusivity, when we make things inclusive, when we are part of a community and a whole, when we feel supported and heard and seen, which is really what humans want, whether you're a child, whether you're an adult, whether you're a senior, like you want to be seen, you want to be heard. And I think that that's the most important thing that we can do for one another.
And what could somebody do if they wanted to check in with somebody as far as how they're feeling about what's going on? What are some questions, non-intrusive questions that they could ask?
Well, sometimes being present, like I walk through the hallway and somebody will say, well, hi, how are you? And they just turned around and you didn't even hear their answer, right? So do I really care how you are if I didn't even wait around to see if you said fine or not? So I think really, what is your intention with that? So when you look at somebody in the eye, you make them feel important. You make them feel that they're seen and that they're heard. So you might say, how are you doing today? And I'm going to wait for your response and hope that you say, I'm doing well, or I'm not doing so well. Oh, what's going on? Because that could lead to the next question.
Because that might be the way that they're reaching out.
Yes.
I used to run marathons all the time. I had a running buddy, and every couple miles we'd be next to each other. We'd check in. Hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember the one time after 15 years of running, he said, how you doing? I said, I'm not doing good. First time I ever said it, just by virtue of being able to say it.
Yes.
And knowing somebody was listening, right?
Absolutely. That's huge.
Yes. And we sat down, right, on a bench. It was a coconut grove. And it was like, what do I want to happen? Right? And I'm going through the process in my head. Okay, this is what's going to happen. I can see the fire rescue over there. So I would walk over there. They give me an IV. They take me to the hospital. Well, 30 minutes later, I was back running.
Yes.
But because he asked me,
mm-hmm.
I was able to give an honest answer.
Absolutely.
And if he wouldn't have asked me, it would have been longer for me to verbalize it.
Yeah.
So often we have to check in. Hey, so what's going on? How are you feeling? And wait for the answer.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then I think part of it is to be able to respond to that. So they go, I'm listening to you and I'm hearing you.
Yes.
What are some code words that somebody might use where you go, I think there's an issue?
So there's an inner narrative running in everyone's mind at any given moment, right? Even in this conversation, our minds have probably gone and shifted to what I'm going to do later or what happened 5 minutes ago, or because that's just human nature. That's how the mind works. And it's a beautiful thing because that means that you're alive and your brain is
so
working.
When we have ADD, Tommy, we're doing okay.
It's a good thing. And so the idea is to bring it back, right? So you kind of train the brain to be present and focusing on this very moment, right? And we use our senses for that. And thankfully, I have all of mine, right? So I think gratitude is one of those wonderful tools that we can use when we realize that I'm present, that I'm here, that I can see you, that I can hear you, that I can taste and touch and smell, because that's how we are. That's how we know the world from the moment we get here, right? So when you listen to someone speak, our words really tell you what's going on, like how they think. And so if you're really present and you're really using all of your senses to be there with that person, they're gonna tell you how they're doing. There's certain, and I don't know exactly a word because there's not like just one word keyword, but if you really listen to what somebody's saying, they will tell you how that person thinks and feels, right? It's an observation.
Years ago, I was in therapy, and I said to I used to be a registered nurse. I was doing some time working at Jackson Hospital in the Institute years ago.
Wonderful.
I said, Doc, I said, the only difference between me and the patients I'm taking care of is I've got the keys. He said, but Michael, that's a big difference. And recognizing we do have all this other stuff that's going on,
Yes.
but being able to get to the point where we can function.
Yes.
So we know a lot of people, again, as we're getting ready to wrap this up, are less productive than before because they have a lot of conversations that are going on, multiple probably. This is one of the few times that the globe has experienced about the same thing about the same time.
Yes. Yes.
So it looks like it's going to be, I hate to say it, a few more months.
Mhm.
So they're talking about maybe in spring, this might be over,
Right.
right? So what do we do? Here it is almost October, right? How do we get through this next month and the month after that and the holidays, especially with so many losses that are going on?
Yeah, I think that it's really important for people to be aware that with grief, birthdays, anniversaries, holidays are always going to be a trigger and a reminder, even more so than a regular day. So to just be aware of that and be cognizant that that's coming, prepare yourself to talk about it, to do things, rituals or things that remind you of that person or maybe in honor of them. I know that for the first birthday without my dad, I went to a restaurant and I celebrated his life on his birthday that day. And it wasn't something that I originally wanted to do, but a family member asked me to do it. My sister had recommended it. And so we did. And it was bittersweet, but I was doing something that I knew he wanted me to do instead of just, doing the opposite, which would have been very easy. And that's okay too, if that's what you need to do. But just really kind of honoring it and not ignoring it, not pushing it down. Because what a lot of people do to cope is to ignore the issue or pretend it didn't happen. And what happens is that you'll have those psychosomatic issues. So you'll have those physical symptoms or something worse can happen because you're not acknowledging it. So acknowledging it, being aware, talking, really, really important.
Lots of people don't understand post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
And I get a little bit. And the biggest one for me is Hurricane Andrew.
Yes.
And if there's a hurricane going around and somebody talks about it, even now I got goosebumps all over my arms just by saying that.
Yes.
And so we should be aware that is deep inside there and that it's okay.
It's okay. Right? Yeah. Yeah. So these intrusive thoughts with PTSD, any little thing, it could be something that has nothing to do with what you think would trigger it. It could be something completely just out of the blue. And it can trigger that emotion and it makes you feel like you were right there in that moment. So you'll start sweating or dizzy or, your body has a physical sense. Yeah, it's a visceral reaction. And so just really understanding that, taking a moment, using your breath, taking a time out and just realizing that that's not happening right now. It happened, but it's not happening now.
You mentioned about taking a breath.
Yeah.
So I know it's a great exercise.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us about that?
So breath work is very important. Like I said, when you come into the world, the first thing you do is to breathe, and it'll be the last thing that we do, right? Is exhale. And if you've ever been with someone who's passed, that's the last thing that they do. And so I think that in between, we have the gift of breath. Oxygen is the most important thing that we have. People in the COVID units, right? We have this issue with the ventilators that they can't breathe. There's nothing more essential and more important to life than to breathe. And through different practices, we use breath to kind of calm down. So I know that in my, I'm a yoga instructor. I also do that as well. And I love yoga. It's a wonderful practice for the nervous system to learn to, auto correct and self-regulate kind of those emotions that are high. And so using your breath kind of refocuses the person to the present moment.
Some people have to have the intellectual reason for doing that. Other people go, let me try. And I understand that. I've been an advocate for that for many years. And so the basic concept at the beginning is what about the controlled breathing? What does that do for our brains?
So it allows space. It allows the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, right, are the two nervous systems. It allows for you to slow down your breath. So your blood pressure, right, can be really high or really low, and your respiratory system, how you're breathing, actually can control that. So you might come into a room after being really stressed out or an argument or something really terrible that happened. Your blood pressure is probably going to be really high and your breath is probably going to be really short, right? You're like not really breathing from your belly. You take that, you can take somebody's blood pressure, a few moments later, do some breath work with them where they get present, they take deep breaths, right? Enough oxygen to the brain. The Apple Watch, I think, now has the thing to measure how much oxygen, because it's crazy to say, but people are not breathing. Like we're just not breathing enough or how we should be. You do a little bit of that with them, their blood pressure will come down.
And this is scientifically proven over and over,
Yeah.
and people have been doing it for hundreds of years, all right?
Yeah.
And so
Thousands.
thousands, yes, hundreds, yes, for thousands. And it's really moving people from, hey, I know you're really nervous, but let's take a break here. Let's do a little pause here. Let's be
Yes.
here and now. All right. I remember taking yoga with downtown 40 years ago, and I thought the whole room was going to explode with with love
Yes.
in there.
Yes.
And being that you're yoga instructor, you must teach everybody on how to control that whole thing with the body and with the
Yes.
mind. And I think that's terrific.
Yeah.
So here we are again. So it's almost October 2021.
Yes.
By the way, Farah, thank you very much. All right. I'm looking at it right there. All right. And again, we have Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
We have Christmas that's
Yeah.
coming up. We have
Yeah.
a New Year.
Yeah.
Right. And it's going to be a tough time for a lot of people. 600,000 people die.
Yes.
They all have families.
Yes.
2 to 10 people, 20 people connected there. In the state of Florida, we've had, I think, over 50,000 people
Yeah.
that have died. A year and a half ago, it was 2,000 out of 22 million. Now it's 50,000.
Yeah.
This thing, it ain't over yet.
No,
right?
it's not.
And so people really need to be careful. But let's wrap it up with how to take care of their emotional well-being.
Yeah.
And if it's out of control, what they should do.
So again, I think that, connecting is a cure, right? It's a medicine. So when we connect with someone else, so check in with that person that you think is really strong. Check in with that person that you think is not so strong, because both are struggling at different times and for different reasons. But it's important to check in with one another, give somebody that phone call, go knock on that door, do something nice for somebody else. And just know that those are going to be tough moments or tough days or tough weeks, and kind of just show a little more compassion. I think that we've kind of lost that humanity in a lot of the things that we do, whether it's the newspaper world or in the medical field. Sometimes we forget that that's just another human being trying to do the best that they can. Or sometimes we're really hard on ourselves and we don't realize that. So I know I do that. So
Sometimes wasn't paying attention to a traffic light. There's a very nice guy. He just honked his horn a little bit. Oh, okay. Versus the other guy that lays down, and my response would probably be different.
Absolutely.
All right? With a guy like that, I waved to him, okay? And the other guy, I would probably say, "Hey, man, I got it." All
you
right.
waved to him differently.
Yes, but the immediate response was like, "Why is he or she doing it like that?" So
Yeah.
we do have to be more compassionate, understanding everybody's in a different place. Like my wife said, "No."
Yeah.
And so this is a time for us to have great understanding.
Yeah.
Be aware that people have their own stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
Maybe they want to keep a distance. Maybe they want to be over there.
Yeah.
And we are acutely aware, more acutely aware of other people than ever before.
I think so. And I think that's a beautiful opportunity to again, show that compassion, patience, and know that when somebody reacts in a way that is maybe not what you would have done, that you come from a place of understanding. It's not an excuse for their behavior, but just understanding that maybe they really are under a lot of stress. Like when I'm upset, how do I react, right? And maybe that person's going through something. So can I show them a little extra patience or kindness? It goes a very long way.
And back to the hearing, I frequently know when somebody says something to me, if they're far away, before the words are even through my brain, is, "What'd you say?" And I realize if I just pause for a second and
Yes.
wait for the rest of it to come in,
Yeah.
I got it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think that is a great lesson for all of us, how to be more compassionate and understanding, and be able to hold people's hands virtually or otherwise, and be able to
Yeah.
move,
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you for your time.
And there's a young lady out there, Gladys, that's looking at you and says, "I want to do that." What you do.
Yeah.
Would you tell us why you chose this field and how you're feeling fulfilled? And look right into that camera right over there.
So I actually studied print journalism at FIU, and that was my undergrad. And then I worked at Barry University in Miami Shores, and that's where I got my master's degree. And I met a gentleman who was my mentor, and he was incredible. And he's probably the reason why I've always liked psychology and sociology. I love people. And I think that journalism and psychology are they're not very different. We're looking at people's stories and how they came to be where they are now. So obviously just looking at it from a different lens, but I think that if you like psychology, if you have the gift that people will talk to you and feel comfortable with you to share what's going on with them, that's something that you can look into and and become somebody else's support system. Yeah.
Again, our guest today is Gladys Amador, who's a licensed mental health counselor. People can find all about your organization at Be Well program. They go online and they can find
At Sanitas, yeah, in
Yes.
Kerlaty.
That's tremendous. Thank you very much for what you do and for
Thank you
taking
very
care of
much.
so many people. Thank you for being here. And Tommy, thank you for that. And again, folks, be safe, take care of yourself. And if you're having a challenge, please talk to a friend, a psychologist. You can walk into the local hospital, the suicide hotline, and you can walk into a fire station. Please don't do anything stupid. It will get better, promise.
Yes.
Thanks for your time.